Hello, this is Kerry Martell here at RVLivingGuide.com, and I will be your guide to adventure. So today's video I think is really important because a lot of people are very confused about whether or not full-time RV living as a digital nomad vagabond type of person where you're traveling around and you're living out of a vehicle or a trailer, if that is the same thing as homelessness, because a lot of people perceive a vehicle as not being a home, so therefore, by the definition of it, you must be homeless, right? Well, no. Homelessness is not an act. It is a subculture and a social class. So simply by not living in a home doesn't make you homeless. For example, if I'm not sleeping in a cabin in the woods, I'm not homeless, I'm camping, right? So it's not the act so much as it is the social class of person themselves, their status within society. That is what defines a person as being homeless. And it's not particularly just the act of not having a house to live in that defines that person as being homeless. This is the difference here. Full-time RV living. Most people consider the vehicle that they're living in to be a home in the first place. So while it's not a traditional home, it is, more similar to like a wagon. And people that traveled, there's always been people who frequently travel. They used to be called merchants. And in a way, a lot of full-time RVers are still a kind of merchant. They're traveling around. They often operate some sort of blog like I do, and they're selling products, or they're selling some sort of service or trade. A lot of them are contractors. They go on a site like Upwork and they do programming or graphic design or video production or whatever it is that they're doing, and they're using the internet in order to facilitate this lifestyle and fund it while they travel. So if you think about full-time RV living in that context, it's not the same thing as homelessness at all, because homeless people don't have jobs. Well, I should be more specific. Most homeless people do not have a reliable source of income. Sometimes homeless people do have a job. That job is being a drug dealer. And this is the reality. This is the things that people don't like to hear. And I can say this shit because I've been living out of a vehicle for a number of years. I have a lot of experience in a lot of different places, lots of different cities all over the United States, even in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada, which is not a great scene for it. I have a lot of experience traveling and seeing and witnessing, and never once in my entire experience have I ever met another person who is like myself, who's just a full-time RV or digital nomad type of person. It has always been homeless drug addicts who are mentally ill. That is who I've always seen. Now, it's different if you go somewhere like Quartzsite, Arizona. If you go there, sure, you're going to meet a lot of digital nomad full-time RVers, but otherwise, they're mostly scattered. There are some people who do it, out of Los Angeles and San Francisco, but I've never met them. We are few and far between. We're rare. Now, we're becoming less rare because the COVID epidemic is making this lifestyle more appealing to a lot of people. They want to get out of states like California and cities and reduce their costs while being able to travel, because they can't travel on planes anymore. So more people are getting into this. But it doesn't change the fact the vast majority of people who are living out of vehicles are homeless people, which is a social class. And it's also kind of a subculture. It's a subculture of the drug subculture, drug users. Just the truth. And they cause problems for you. So I have a lot of experience interacting with these people, unfortunately, because they'll come over and they'll try to talk to me. Or they'll just be in the same areas that I managed to find parking for my camper van or my RV when I'm boondocking in a city. So I've observed a lot of their behavior. I've had interactions, and they've never been great ones. They just haven't. And you don't have to personally interact with these people. There's lots of YouTube videos on this topic. Just type up homelessness in Venice as an example, and you'll find a lot of great videos that really show the LA scene of homelessness and how bad it is and who these people really are. This is also why a lot of the solutions that cities come up with to try to solve the problems never work, because they don't recognize that homelessness is not a consequence of not having money. It is a subculture within the drug subculture, and it leads to severe mental illness. So once these people have, had enough brain damage, they basically cannot be saved. You can't rehabilitate somebody who no longer has the mental faculty and is now arguing with ghosts and trying to fight ghosts and randomly attacking people. Things, all of which I have witnessed. I have witnessed all this stuff. Multiple cities, multiple places. Shit, I dare you. Spend a week in Hollywood going down the train system. And I guarantee you, you will witness at least one homeless, mentally ill person attack somebody. Just a week. I swear, within a week you'll see it. It's common. It's so common because it's a major problem the city's not solving. What they've done is they built homeless shelters. They call them shelters, but they're not really shelters. They're land development deals, and they're overpriced hotels that charge the city is what they really are. They built these things in nice places like Hollywood and Venice, and it attracts them because they come for the free shit. So these solutions are gonna solve it. There's only two things that are gonna solve the homelessness problem in the United States. The first is you need to change the court system, and you need to change some of the laws. And in particular, you need to make it easier to commit people involuntarily to long-term treatment centers for drugs without having necessarily convict them of crimes. It should really be that if you refuse to get drug treatment, yeah, we'll send you to jail, because there has to be some sort of consequence to not continue on the path that you're on. There has to be a consequence, otherwise people aren't going to be motivated to do it. When you're addicted to drugs, you're no longer able to use the correct mental faculties for critical thinking, for being logical and reasonable. You're very primal now. You're very emotionally driven by this need to feed this addiction. So they have to have some sort of wake-up call, something that's got to rattle them. And having to go to a jail has to be the case. Now, I do think that once they're in jail and they've now hopefully been isolated from the drugs, and they've gone through the worst of it, they should be allowed at a later date to say, hey, I want to go through treatment. And if they go through treatment, then they should get a pardon for their charges. That's what I believe the process should be. Not drug courts, because that's not going to work. Because it's just not going to work. I think a lot of the people do have to go to jail for a wake-up call to motivate them to now want to go to treatment. And once they complete the treatment, then, give them a pardon for those convictions. This system could be implemented very easily at the federal level, and they're not doing it because our politicians are so focused on bullshit that they're not doing very simple, straightforward things. The second thing that you have to do is that you have to recognize you can't rehabilitate everybody, because a lot of people are too far gone. They've had too much brain damage from their drug addictions. They have to be taken care of for the rest of their lives, basically, and it's going to have to be on the taxpayer dime. And while that's kind of shitty, the truth is that us as citizens, as taxpayers, have continued to not do what we should do, which is put better politicians in office who will implement the solution I just talked about, which would have solved this stuff way back in the 80s if they had just done it that way simply. There's nothing that they could have done. There's nothing in the 80s that would have stopped them from doing what I just said. So it is kind of our fault as a society for continuing to choose bad leaders who continue to milk the homeless situation for bribery and schemes and land developments. And I'll get into that next. So taxpayers have to pay for long-term medical care of these people who are addicted, because even though they are responsible for their own choices, they're here now. We got to deal with them. We can't just execute them, because that's immoral and wrong. And us as a society, we should have chosen better leaders who would have put a real solution in. So now we've got to take care of these people until they pass. And at that point, I think that we would then be able to shut down the asylums, because we shut them down too soon. We need asylums back, basically. Not the way that they were before with all the junk pop psychology science. We can do a lot better job now because we have better doctors, basically, now. And we have systems in place to prevent the types of abuses that occurred before. But the reality is, a lot of these people are so far gone that they're basically like feral animals at this point. They run around cities, attacking people, attacking themselves. I mean, one of my friends, Eric, he witnessed a guy smashing his hands against the ground, and you could hear the bones in his hand breaking as he was just destroying his own body. These people have to be committed. They can't function in society, and we just need to accept that. So those two things will solve homelessness. Let's talk about what's currently happening with homelessness. Let's take the city of Austin as an example. City of Austin is doing something which is completely stupid, which is where they're doing land development deals. They're spending tens, eventually it will be hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money into land development deals for overpriced housing. This is how it works. They'll spend about $100,000 to build a hut, and let's just call it what it is. It's not a tiny home. It's a fucking hut. Poorly built bullshit in the exterior of Austin. For $100,000, you could build an actual real house in the same area. Yeah, I know this because I owned a house right outside of Austin that cost me $109,000. And it was a 2-story house with 4 bedrooms and 2 baths and a backyard and a garage. And they're spending $100,000 building fucking huts in this land development deal, funded by taxpayers in the city of Austin. People are naive and dumb. It has been exposed in many cities that a lot of city councils take kickbacks from construction companies to do land development deals, and the permitting and all that. There's often a lot of bribery involved. And I don't have proof of it in the city of Austin, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's what's going on, because whenever I see extremely overpriced housing development being using taxpayer money or donations from people that want to do good but are naive and are allowing their heartstrings to be plucked and played, they're getting played like an instrument. Whenever I see this shit, there's always fraud. There's always fraud at the other end of it, every single time. And that's the only real explanation for why you would pay $100,000 to build a fucking tiny home. It's crazy. If they really wanted to do this in a way that was actually serious, they wouldn't be building homes. They would be taking pre-existing older trailers that they can buy for a couple $1,000s, and they would be parking them on this land. And they're not doing that because the purpose is so that they can charge high fees to these construction companies that they're associated with, that they either directly own through a network of LLC shell companies, or they're getting kickbacks from somebody else. It's always a scam, and people are very good at using these nonprofits to do this shit, you know? They just are. And that's the problem with homelessness in the United States. Now, again, full-time RV living is very different. It's a different lifestyle. You have an income. You are able to function in society, and most of them are not using drugs. The people that end up using drugs, they do end up becoming a homeless person because they're not able to function in society. They get brain damage. They can't keep their schedules, because being a contractor, a freelancer, requires you to be very self-organized. You have to be very motivated, and you got to stay focused. Otherwise, you do a shitty job and people won't hire you, or they won't pay you. More importantly, people only pay you as a freelancer when they're happy with your work and they want to have a future business deal with you. That's been my experience. Freelancers get ripped off often. So unless you're really good at what you're doing, it's really hard to be a freelancer. It's a very different lifestyle, and full-time RV living just isn't the same thing as homelessness. That you don't have any of those problems that defines that social class, and it defines that subculture that they're part of. Because homelessness, they're not living in silos. They're living in communities of other people who are homeless, who have the same problematic behaviors, the drug addictions, and the other crazy crime stuff that they end up doing in order to acquire money to feed their addictions. It's a set of behaviors and attitudes, and it's defined by their economic status as a consequence of these poor decisions that they've been making. That is what homelessness is. It is not simply not having a house and simply living in a trailer. Even if you're in a trailer park, it doesn't make you homeless. It just makes you a full-time RV liver. Now, on the subject of RV parks, this video is getting kind of long, but I think this is really important. RV parks isn't really, people have the wrong idea about them. A lot of people don't live in RV parks forever. There is a portion of people that do live full-time in RV parks out of their trailers because they either have very little money and it's a very affordable way to live, or alternatively they're intentionally trying to save money in their careers. There's those two types of people that are full-time RVers in RV parks. However, as permanent residents, I should say, the other class is people like me who are only temporarily staying in RV parks for like maybe 4 to 6 months at a time, and then we travel to somewhere else. I may not even stay that long. Sometimes I only stay for a couple months. A lot of people are like this, and there's basically two types of people in my experience that do that. It's people that are snowbirds, which is mostly people who are older seniors, and they'll basically go to somewhere like Arizona for the winter, and then they'll go to Florida for the summer. Or alternatively, people that are following college and professional sports, and they specifically, like, they get passes to the entire year, annual passes, 12 games, and they travel around. Sometimes they'll go and just stay for the home games. So if they're a big fan of like the Oregon Ducks, then they'll be in like Eugene, Oregon, and where the RV park's there, and they'll stay for the season, and then they'll go somewhere else the rest of the time, follow some different sport when that picks up. So those are basically the two types of people in my experience that are doing this. Then there's this new emerging class, which is people like myself, which is a much smaller population, the digital nomad vagabond types of people who are not of retirement age, and we're not following sports. We're just living in this way because we work remotely through the internet as contractors and freelancers or business owners, and we take advantage of that freedom of being able to work anywhere to travel. Now, some digital nomads are very focused on international travel, but that doesn't exist anymore because of COVID. So most of these people are now gravitating toward RV purchases, and they're now traveling around the United States and exploring the United States more than they would before, going to the state parks, going to cities, going to the nooks and crannies of this America and seeing it. And I think it's a good thing, because a lot of these people who have traditionally been the international digital nomads, I think that they get a lot of great experience interacting with other cultures, but they don't really get the experience of interacting with other cultures here in the United States, so they have very naive ideas about some things. So I think it's going to improve a lot of people's understanding of America and what it really is, because there's a lot of stereotypes that just aren't necessarily true about certain regions. This video's kind of long, and there's somebody behind me who's probably messing with their dog, I guess it is. So I'm going to end this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Cheers.